911 operators of Reddit. What is the pettiest reason someone has called 911? A classmate of mine in 6th grade called 911 because he lost to his sister in Hungry Hippos. I didn't see the before his sister, and I thought it was an extremely high stakes game of Hungry Hippos. I received a call on an emergency line from a 90-something-year-old lady asking me what lamp she should put in her bedroom. I told her I did not understand, and that the sheriff's office was not the correct place to ask. Eventually she got upset and said fine, I'll call 911. They'll help me there. I tried to tell her that 911 would just go back to me and it was a misuse of an emergency line. But it was too late. 15 seconds later 911 rings. I answer and lo and behold it was the lady asking what lamp should I get for my bedroom. I think a welfare check may have been in order. Yeah, I'm in England. We had a call. I worked for the ambulance service asking where the best place to get a bacon sandwich was at 4 in the morning. I know that I'm the US. Abusing the emergency line like is a crime. Is there a mother-in-law law in the UK? There is. But it very rarely gets followed up. I used to find. If it was serious and there were multiple crews from fire, ambulance and police, and they caught someone, it would end with a conviction. But just for an ambulance there would rarely be consequences, which is sad. The law is there but rarely followed up for a solo crew. Woman called because her pregnant 14 or 15-year-old granddaughter who lived with her and whose bed was the couch wouldn't get off the couch so she could use it to watch TV. The woman felt very indignant when I asked what exactly do you want the police to do. Officer cleared the call with she's got nowhere else to go. Grandma said it's okay for her to stay. Also, lots of ambulance calls for I have a stomachache, which was code for I need a free pregnancy test. What type of insurance makes ambulances emergency room visits cheaper than dollar store pregnancy tests? You need medical documentation that says you are pregnant to get government assistance. Dollar store pregnancy tests don't provide them. Fastest way to get the paperwork is through the emergency room. And ambulance rides and emergency room visits don't cost anything if you don't pay the brother-in-law. Ambulance rides and emergency room visits don't cost anything if you don't pay the brother-in-law. I work in M's brother-in-law link, and you'd be surprised by how many people don't pay their ambulance brother-in-laws. It's not uncommon for 1 in 20 uninsured people pay their brother-in-law. I know one municipality where it's more like 1 in 40. I once had the cops called on me by my neighbor. There was a car parked on the street by his backyard, not blocking his parking space in front of his house, not on his property, not inconveniencing him in any way. It was not my car or that of anybody I knew. Same neighbor called the cops on me for animal abuse. My dog was in my fenced-in backyard with a bowl of food and a bucket of water in the shade. Told the cops I chained him up all day and night with no food. I showed the cops the pup and was just like, why would I chain up a dog in a fenced-in yard? Same neighbor called the cops on me for verbal assault when he knocked on my door and said it was against the law to leave my trash can by the road a day after pickup, and I told him to duck off and close the door. The weird thing is I never did anything to the guy to get him to start this, and from what I asked the other neighbors he didn't do that to them. 2 reasons to chain a fenced dog: your fence is terrible but something's preventing you from fixing it, or your dog is houndini. Let's see. A person in a suburban neighborhood called to report a group of youths on bikes, skateboards, etc. said they were up to no good. When asked what they were doing that constituted a crime or was dangerous, the caller admitted that they hadn't seen anything as such, but they just knew that these kids were up to no good. Didn't even dispatch anyone for that. During a very busy few minutes, some idiot with a scanner decided to call 911 and tell me that one of the local EMS agency's radio channel had an open mic. Basically, that refers to when a radio is accidentally activated and transmitting, potentially picking up any sounds conversation nearby, usually for an extended period of time. Since we did 911 call taking and dispatch, I was actively listening to said radio channel as this person called. There was no open mic. On a fairly regular basis, people would call 911 because someone wouldn't return property that they had lent. This is 100% not a police issue. As soon as I learn that the property was given loan willingly, it makes it a civil, that is non-criminal, non-police issue. On the other hand, this one initially seemed petty but actually wasn't. A guy called, and I had a difficult time understanding exactly what he was saying. He was definitely talking about something coming out of his toilet, so I thought he was calling about a plumbing issue. Unfortunately, this is not unheard of, though it is certainly not a good reason to call 911. After listening a bit more, however, I realized that he was reporting demons coming out of his toilet. He was genuinely and very distressed by this, and I didn't suspect that it was a joke or prank. Unfortunately, there was no one I could send right away, so I decided to try to help. I told him to put the toilet lid down. He took my advice, and what would you know? The demon stopped coming out. He was very appreciative. We still sent someone once they were available only a few minutes later. Good to know toilet seat lids are demon proof. Not an operator, but once someone called cops on me for leaving an unattended bag in the park by our house. Thing was, it was in a town of less than 1,000 people. Tiny park. I was there the whole time. I set it on the table while I played with my young kids. The entire park is visible from any direction. I was never more than 100 foot from my son's diaper bag and the cops came and seemed really confused when they saw me and asked if it was my bag. I was like, yeah. Then they told me why they came and I was floored. They were annoyed with whoever called and left without further questioning. Not a dispatcher, but when I was in EMS we were dispatched to a psych call. When we got there this lady was standing outside her house ready to go to the hospital. On the way to the hospital I was talking to her and trying to get her vitals when she told me there was nothing wrong with her, that she heard if her mother-in-law member was in the hospital and needed a ride. So she called 911. Cops met us at the hospital for her. Obligatory, not a 911 operator. 8 or 9 years ago, my husband and I had a couple of acquaintances over for dinner one night. They were from our local poker group. The four of us were having a great time when one of the guys accidentally knocked over the other guy's phone and cracked its screen. The second guy went mental. He started yelling at the first guy and demanded that he pay to repair the screen. The second guy agreed to it, but the first guy kept yelling and yelling. He called 911 and the cops came. He told the cops that the second guy broke his phone and he wanted to father-in-law a police report. He asked the cops to force the second guy to give him money to repair his phone. The cops were so confused and annoyed. We were mortified because it happened at our house and the cops knew our landlord. We never invited him to our house again. The number for Domino's Pizza. I told him he wanted 411 directory assistance in the US. Not 911. 911 was for emergencies only. People who get cut off in traffic are probably the worst inane callers. Like, oh so this happened 3 hours ago. You don't remember the road it happened on. You don't know the registration of the VOI. There was no traffic crash. And there is not even the insinuation that either party involved were under influence of substances. Noise complaints us a mother-in-law. People calling the emergency line to complain about being arrested earlier. One once complaining about being charged for abusing the emergency line. I've had a woman call emergency because their sister was refusing to share their food at a cinema. But what is probably more insane is the serious incidents that are started by inane and petty things. Once had a serious FTV between a mother and daughter. The mother stabbed the daughter after an argument over the color of cupcake batter. I had a guy call 911 just because he wanted to see fire trucks and ambulances with lights and sirens. He miscalculated. There was a cop too, and he was not amused. Dude spent the night in jail. I work for small police station, but once had 911 put through a caller who then requested that I patch them through to a pizza place so they could order pizza from a 911 only cell phone. Not me, but a close mother-in-law friend worked taking 911 calls for years. She said the number of calls they get about how to cook turkeys at Thanksgiving time is just baffling. My coworker answered a call asking how badly the bridge was backed up as they had diarrhea. I'm not a 911 operator, but here we go. When I was in college, 90% of my professors were retired or still serving police officers. I was studying police foundations. One of the instructors was telling us about an older lady whose husband had recently passed away. She was dialing 911 every day because she was lonely and wanted a police officer to come and keep her company. They had tried explaining to her that 911 was for emergencies only, but she couldn't help it. To her, she was alone and wanted to have someone with her, so it seemed like an emergency. Eventually my professor was the one to respond to the call, so he went to her house and sat with her. She made tea and put out some cookies, and they sat and talked until he had a call. In his eyes it was public service, so he made a deal with her if she agreed to stop calling for this reason. Once every rotation of shifts, approximate once a week, he would go to her house and have tea and cookies. She never called 911 again for that reason, and every week he'd stop by and have tea and cookies until she passed away a few years later. He finished the story saying something like this: "We should never forget that, although law enforcement is a big part of our job, public service comes in many forms." 911 What is your emergency? Oh yeah. This bitch is gonna call and say I hit her, but she's lying. I didn't do nothing. Okay sir, can I have your name and location so we know who she's lying about when she calls? Click. Not an operator, but a female customer once called the cops on my coworkers for scaring her too much. We work at a haunted house. In Australia we 000 for emergency services, but because too many people watch American television, the 911 number automatically redirects to 000. There's too many. I once got a call from a mother-in-law of frequent flyers. Her husband's wife ordered the wrong topping on a pizza, so they got in an argument, and then she threw a ham sandwich at his head. Another time a call came from a woman who just got out of church and the drive through to KFC was too long, and she wanted an officer to come out and help. Fun times. When I was 5 I called 911 because my mom threw away some leftover McDonald's fries I had saved from the day before. When I was 4 I called 911 because my mom threw away some old toys of mine. Damn, cops didn't arrest her either time. If you want an opposite story kind of, once I called the police non-emergency line because I heard gunshots outside of my very Canadian, very suburban house. The officer took my report and then said, "Well, should this ever happen again, I'd like to encourage you to call 911 and not the reporting desk." My husband and I also spent 15+ minutes debating if we should call or not, and the officer had questions about that too. I was a paramedic. Worse was the woman calling for us to transport her with the flu. Her reason: since she's on Medicare it costs nothing to call an ambulance, but about 10 for a taxi. In the middle of transport, had our little girl stop breathing right next to our station. Took the next closest unit about 10 minutes to get there, when it would have taken us less than a minute. Yeah, I didn't last long in that field. In the city where I live, if there's an Amber Alert beeping on your phone at 3 AM, people will call 911 to bitch about it to the operators, saying that it woke them up. Not an operator, but my neighbor once threatened to call the cops on me for parking in my own driveway because I was preventing her from blocking it. Edit clarity: she wasn't blocking my driveway from the street. I live in a rural community, in one of several compounds. It's a totally different setup from a normal neighborhood. She was parking in my actual driveway. I'm not an operator, but I'll share a story. I was younger, probably around 13 years old, 2001, 2003. My dad gave me his old cell phone to play with. It didn't have any service, so it couldn't make calls. Bored one summer day, I decided to try calling 911 just to see what would happen. Well, the call went through, and I instantly hung up. 5 minutes later, an officer shows up at our house. He said I was nearby and just came over to make sure everything was okay. I explained my mistake and felt really bad for wasting his time. I was surprised that the cops were able to track the disconnected cell phone, and this was way back before smartphones. At the beginning of COVID, people would call 911 to rat out their Chinese neighbors Canadian-born, only because the pandemic started there. Plenty of old people call 911 because they just can't rationalize who else to call when something happens like a power outage. But they're usually very nice and don't seem to understand that 911 isn't the place. That said, had a guy call 911 because he lived in a gated community and the gate was stuck open, like it wouldn't close. Nobody was trapped or anything, and he said, and I quote, "Well, I don't have a number for emergency maintenance, so I figured you guys would know somebody." In general, we also get a lot of calls of suspicious people that's just guy sitting in his truck for a little too long. Always really pisses me off to talk to the nosy ass people who are so paranoid of everyone that they waste my time telling me the black dude just doesn't look like he belongs here. I was calling a friend whose number started by 901. Misdialed. Hung up immediately before call was pick up. 20 later cop showed up at the door, asking to come in. My weed pipe was on the floor, but he left without giving me any problems.